Which new 2020 DLC car is best on console? And what are the strengths and weaknesses of both in comparison to each other? This is the fundamental question I've started with. For a bit of context, I'm starting a new 4-race series on a Monday night, which will be streaming on my Twitch channel 8pm UTC. Check it out in the link in the description below. The unique factor of this series being a restriction on drivers to use either of the two new 2020 DLC cars, the Ferrari GT3 or the Mercedes GT3. I wanted to take the opportunity to test the two in a little bit more of a back-to-back style approach, choosing the first track in the series, Misano. The video is going to be broken down into 3 parts. First the Ferrari Hotlap and thoughts, then the Mercedes Hotlap and thoughts, and then finally a side-by-side lap comparison, as well as the final Hotlap time so you can see for yourselves the differences. I hadn't really driven the previous version of the 488 GT3, mainly because of the poor front end it had. But I was happy to see after spending a little bit of time with this one that the front end is dramatically improved. On turn-in and mid-corner, after some while faffing about with the setup, I was able to get the front generally going where I wanted it pretty nicely. The car seems to respond really well to having quite stiff bump damping both front and rear. Just enabling to control that initial bit of weight transfer really seemed to help the car push into the corners and allowed me to get a bit more on top of it and do what I wanted with it, which was good. That wasn't perfect, but overall was getting quite a lot of enjoyment out of the car by the end. I know it's strong with the 2020 BOP, so I will be driving this car quite a bit in the future, I think. The car was bottoming out quite a lot on the entry into some of the corners, so I couldn't abuse the track limits quite as much as I would have wanted, like I can in the Merc. You can see that in the back-to-back lap side-by-side comparison that comes up later. The Merc is able to abuse track limits much more than Ferrari, but it makes up for it in mid-corner rotation, the general handling balance that comes with a mid-engined car, and a nice light front end. The lap was a 32.4, so could be quicker. I could probably even see this getting into a 31 if I really spent the time with it, but it is a decent enough lap for now. And now we'll head on to the Mercedes Hotlap. Initially, when I first drove the Merc, I thought it was going to be a lot quicker and a lot easier to drive than the Ferrari, because it was just taking curbs like there's no tomorrow, no issues. As soon as I started picking up the pace and started getting myself into the 32s, I was having a really difficult time managing with the rear end. I couldn't find a setup that was allowing me to get the front end to do what I wanted while still keeping the rear end in check. I was fighting for it for a couple of hours. Didn't come anywhere near as naturally as the Ferrari did to me. Good thing with the Merc was you can still really abuse the track limits, even if you take the ride height right down to the lowest settings. You can still go right out wide on the entry into some of the corners, which you can't do in every car. Obviously there's a bunch of torque with the engine, so it's decent on exit, but finding a balance to get the rotation how I wanted it was really difficult. What I did find is by just adding a tiny bit of rear toe, and we went to positive 0.02 rear toe, it just helped stabilise the car a little bit, and I could get on top of it and drive it more consistently myself. So I suggest trying. I think it was a pretty good lap, but was not coming as easily to me as the Ferrari was. Time was a 32.7 in the end, so a little bit slower than the Ferrari. I'm surprised, as the data I've seen for the PC version of the game suggests that round Misano both cars are near enough identical pace-wise, but on the console Mercedes was a lot more difficult to get right to the limit and on the edge. So it'll be interesting to see on a couple of other tracks if I see the same sort of data between the Ferrari and the Mercedes, or whether Misano is a bit of an outlier. Either way, here's a side-by-side of the two cars together. You should be able to see the Mercedes abusing the track limits a lot more, but the Ferrari being able to get a bit better mid-corner rotation and carrying a bit more apex speed. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Cheers guys.